welcome to Live at the Lazy T Ranch. I'm Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate. Chris Wilson is doing video. It's really a pleasant late summer afternoon, late August afternoon here at the Lazy T Ranch. Today I want to talk about baling hay. Something that's probably taken for granted, but it's a very important element of our ranching system. So imagine this scenario. Let's say our family has a summer garden in the backyard, and in the summertime we go out and I want to eat some green beans. So I pick some green beans right out of the garden and we fix it up for supper. Very good. But let's fast forward 4 or 5 months and it's wintertime and there's half a foot of snow around the house and those garden plants are long gone. And you know what? I want to eat some green beans for supper. But there's no green beans in the garden. But what I can do is go to the pantry and pick out a can of green beans and fix those green beans for supper. Or maybe I go to the freezer and pick up a plastic bag of frozen green beans and prepare those for supper. We can enjoy those green beans out of season because someone harvested those green beans and put them in a package and saved them for consumption later on. I got to thinking that's kind of how our feeding system applies to our cattle here at the Lazy T Ranch. Right now our cattle are out on grass. They're out on pasture, they're grazing, they're eating the growing green grass. But in the fall we'll bring them into the livestock here next to the barns and we'll have them in a dry lot. And when winter comes, 4 or 5 months from now, there'll be half a foot of snow out there. There's no growing grass for those cows to eat, but I can go to where I have packaged up that hay from this summer and saved it for winter consumption. And so in this case, the package that we put that hay in is called a bale. So let's talk about baling hay. Sometimes people ask, what is hay? Well, think of it this way. Lettuce is a growing green plant that is cut and cleaned and becomes a salad. Grass or alfalfa are growing green plants that's cut and allowed to air dry and then becomes hay. So hay is cured, dried grass or alfalfa or brome, some forage. So let's talk about how that hay is handled. Here at the Lazy T Ranch we have a couple of kinds of hay. One is prairie hay, and prairie hay is native grass hay. So it's cut from a meadow where the native grass grows, various varieties of native grass, big blue stem, little blue stem, and so forth. And it's harvested once a year. So it's kind of like your lawn. If you were to let your lawn grow to maximum height and mow it all at once and you had a bunch of big giant grass clippings, that's a little bit the way we handle prairie hay. Alfalfa is the other crop that we have here at the Lazy T Ranch, and it's extremely important. Alfalfa is high protein, high energy, very nutritious, has minerals, and is very palatable to livestock. So it's a very important crop, and it also regrows very quickly. So you can cut that alfalfa and bale it up, and in a month or so it'll grow up and you can cut it and bale it again. We might get 3 or 4 cuttings of alfalfa off a given field. So alfalfa is a highly nutritious crop that's extremely important to us. When the hay is cut, it's cut and put in what we call a windrow, which is like a giant row of big grass clippings. And then it's allowed to dry for a day or two, and then it's packaged into a bale. So let's talk about hay handling and baling. In the early days of handling hay, even the way my dad did it, he had a sickle mower pulled by a tractor. He'd go out to the hay field and he would pull that mower through the field and it would lay down that tall grass. And then he would come out with a rake, not a hand rake, but a wheeled rake pulled by a tractor, and that rake would go through and spin that cut grass into a windrow. And you let that dry for a day or two, and then maybe you wanted to put a couple of windrows together. So you might go through and rake the hay again. That's 3 passes through the field. Well, the haying system changed. And we go back to 1949. A Kansas entrepreneur by the name of Lyle Yost in Heston, Kansas, formed a farm equipment company that became known as the Heston Corporation, named after his hometown. Originally, they built augers for moving grain, but in 1955, the Heston Corporation, led by Lyle Yost, introduced what would become a self-propelled piece of equipment that would cut, would condition, and would put the hay into a windrow all in one operation. So instead of 3 passes through the field, there was one. And behind that piece of equipment, he would leave a swath of hay. And so that piece of equipment was called a swather. There were tractor-drawn swathers, self-propelled swathers in later years. And the swather in many ways revolutionized the way we handled our hay production system. And Heston, Kansas became the epicenter of hay and forage equipment. And if you don't think that this was important, let me tell you that if you went to Heston, Kansas today and visited the high school, you would find that the high school mascot is not the Indians or the Wildcats or something else. It is the Swathers. Go Swathers, mow them down, yay Heston. And I'm told that on Friday nights, the dealer will drive a Swather down Main Street to the stadium. So that's small town spirit that celebrates agriculture, and it celebrates the swather. So the swather was what would cut and condition the hay. How about baling hay? Well, in the beginning, there were not hay bales, there was loose hay. And I want to show you for years, not hundreds of years, but for thousands of years, the farmer's 2 hay tools were these: a hand-carried scythe and a pitchfork. For thousands of years, these were the tools that a hay producer would use. So the farmer would go out with this scythe and mow the grass by hand. And after he cut it by hand, he would take that pitchfork and load it onto a horse-drawn wagon that would carry the hay up to the barn, and then that loose hay would be pitched into the barn or used with a contraption to put the hay into the hayloft. That was a lot of work. And then came an era of mechanization, and as you can imagine, trying to stack loose clippings is not a very efficient use of space. So they figured out that they could package it into a bundle called a bale. And they invented this device, a stationary baler, that basically would press the grass into a square bundle, and when enough hay was in there, the farmer could hand tie it with a piece of string. Now this piece of equipment was stationary, so that meant you had to cut the hay and bring the hay to the baler. And the baler itself was operated by a horse. We talk about tractors and engines with multiple horsepower. Well, this was a 1 horsepower device because it was powered by 1 horse. The horse would walk on a wheel or a treadmill, and through a system of gears, it would pack that hay into what would become a bale. So we were bringing the hay, the loose hay, from the field to the baler. Well, then somebody figured out they could put wheels on the baler and take the baler to the hay. And what's more, some smart person invented a device that would automatically tie the string or later wire around that bale. So it would go through the field and the baler would pack the hay together and then tie it into a bale. And that's kind of where I came in. Growing up here at the Lazy T Ranch, hay is very important to us. And in those days, my dad would hook up the tractor to the baler that would produce small square bales that looked like this. And we would go through the hayfield with the tractor, the baler, and then a wagon behind the baler. And the baler would spit out bales this size. And my job, my brother's job, or the hired man's job was typically to take this hay hook and to pull those bales off the baler and then stack them on the wagon. And we would have a rack of hay, like a rack of wood, and we would stack those bales 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers, 4 layers, if you're feeling strong, 5, 6, 7 layers high of these so-called small square bales that would then be taken up to the barn, and then you have to put the dadgum bales back into the hayloft one bale at a time. And I knew some guys who were experts with these hay hooks and experts at stacking hay, and I always admired them greatly. That was a lot of work. It was hot, dry, dusty work, and in a lot of ways I miss it because we were in shape, we were young and fit and strong. And again, times changed, and now we're handling bales, not 40-pound bales like this, but 1,400-pound bales or 1,200-pound bales that, of course, are moved by a big tractor. I'm told that in 2019, Kansas produced 6.3 million tons of hay, valued at $733 million. So hay and forage is extremely important to Kansas, and it's still that cycle of harvesting the hay in the summer and packaging it into bundles, bales, and saving it for winter feed. And the cycle repeats itself, and it's a tremendous way for agriculture and the livestock industry to use the natural resources that we have and to help feed the world. Let me finish up my segment with a cowboy poem that I wrote as a tribute to this industry. The poem is called Hey There. Growing up here on the ranch back when I was just a kid, helping bale up hay was the first field job I ever did. I was too young to drive a tractor, too little to do much, but I could go to the hayfield and help with bales and such. My dad would drive the tractor, pulling baler and wagon behind as we moved across the field where the windrows were aligned. The baler picked up hay and spit out each small square bale, although occasionally we'd stop when the knot tire would fail. The hired man had a hay hook. He'd pull bales up on the wagon and stack them up 5 high until the heat would have him dragging. My job was to ride on top, holding together the stack of hay, although I think the hired man put me there to keep me out of the way. When I got bigger, I became the one to use that sharp hay hook. Stacking bales up high was the task I undertook. When the hay rack was full, then I would say, oh darn, because that meant unloading them in the hayloft of the barn. It was a hot and dusty job in the barn with no breeze moving, but when it was all done, my dad was so approving. When we pulled the last bale in with muscles tired and sore, we would say, well, that's the bale that I've been looking for. The years have come and gone with the changes that entails. We now use a tractor to move the big round bales, but when the hay is all put up, I still have the urge to say, now that's the one that I've been looking for, because we're really making hay. Folks, thanks for joining us on Lazy T Live. Join us each Tuesday, 1 p.m. right here on Facebook for Live at the Lazy T Ranch. Until then, be safe, be well, happy trails, and God bless.